Hi, this is Kim Droptini, and this is episode 2 of Missionary Stories Abroad. And this one is called Off to England. And last episode, I shared about my call around the age of 50 to go to Europe as a missionary to share the great gospel of Jesus Christ. So my daughter and I were accepted to work as workers, cleaners, cooks in a retreat center in Oxford, England at the Stanton House. We were accepted to come together and we were given visas, I think, for 2 years to go to England. So now I had to sell my home. I really felt from the Lord that I should just give up everything. And I think the Lord told me that. But also, an inspiration for me was my own daughter. She had been in Europe. Let's see, uh, was it 3 years? I can't remember now. Yes, 3 years as a missionary. And before she went, she felt she was to give away all her possessions and sell things to get the money to go over there. She had also worked as a nanny and saved up money. But when it came time for her to go, she didn't have enough for the plane ticket. And I remember we had a garage sale. She sold some stuff and we were just praying and praying. And our motto was, where God guides, he provides, which would be my motto as well when we went to Europe. But I'll never forget, the time was running short. She had to get that airplane ticket. She didn't have the money. And a miracle happened. A friend of mine that I worked with was a retired airline stewardess, and she could still get tickets, for her family or friends. I think she could get 3 tickets a year. And she wasn't a Christian, but she knew about my daughter. She knew she was trying to get to Europe. And she called me up one day. She said, "Did Brianna get her ticket yet?" And I said, "No." She handed my daughter a first class ticket to England. And we were just rejoicing and saying, "Thank you, God." So now she not only had a first class ticket, but she also had a little bit of money that she'd been saving up to buy the ticket to kind of carry her through once she got over there. So I knew that story, and I felt that God just blessed and honored her for giving everything away. And so I had that in my heart. I thought, I'm just going to sell my home, get rid of everything, and go. And I envisioned myself never coming back to the United States. So I'm still sometimes surprised to find myself back here. But that's what we did. And God was good. I put my house on the market. I think it sold like in, I don't know, 3 weeks. It sold very quickly. And God provided in another unique way. I worked I worked in the public schools. That was my job. And I worked with a man, and he knew I was planning to leave for Europe. And I'll never forget, one day he just came to my house and dropped off one of those sprayers that can clean your cement, clean your deck. He just said, "Here, this might help," and left. And I wouldn't have even thought of that. I remember spraying and cleaning my whole driveway and watching it go from gray, black to white. I remember spraying my deck in the back, and I couldn't believe how that spruced up my home and made it look so much better. And my mom and dad, who were so sad that I was leaving, but they still came over. They helped clean, they helped paint. God just provided, even in the move of selling my home, everything I needed. And so things were looking good. Things were looking up. We went to stay with a friend, I think a week before we were to fly out of the Portland airport. And in that week, also we had my son was going to go to Youth with a Mission, like within a week after we left. So he had all of his clothes, his guitar, everything from our home in Brianna's car. Plus, I think his laptop was in there. She had a lot of her things, a lot of her, just this car was just cram packed in the back. And she had her laptop bag and her visa, her passport with her newly minted visa to go to England was in her computer bag. Anyway, her and a friend decided, let's go to the beach. Let's have a friend time together. Brianna wanted to see the Oregon coast one last time before she took off for Europe. So they drove to the beach. They had a great time. They were driving back, and all of a sudden they noticed there was smoke coming out of the engine of Brianna's car. And it kind of became more and more, and they kind of panicked. And her friend said, pull over, pull over. So they pulled over, jumped out of the car, and right then the car just burst into flames. Luckily, they had been behind the car, and they were able to walk back away from this burning car. And my daughter fell to her knees just crying because she saw her car, she saw her brother's possessions, everything going up in flames. And some people were driving by, and this lady stopped and said, "Can I help you?" And Bree said, "My I'm going off to Europe, and my passport was in that car, and my visa, it's being burnt up. What am I going to do? I'm leaving in like 4 days to Europe. What am I going to do?" And this lady turned out to be a Christian, just randomly stopped on the road. She hugged my daughter. She prayed. She prayed for that passport, just prayed, helped call a tow truck, um, and they did make it home. The burnt car got towed to a lot. And I think the very next day, Brianna went to the lot to see what she could salvage out of the car. And it was a miracle. Everything. There was things you couldn't even recognize. The fire was so big, but her passport was in a leather bag, which was burnt, but somehow Brianna opened up that crumbling, it was falling apart, and pulled out her visa with her passport with a British visa intact. It was smoky smelling, but there it was. What a miracle. And it was still, that was a hard thing. She lost her car. And she felt so bad for her brother, but God was good to my son. Somebody bought him a brand new guitar. Um, Somehow he scrambled, was able to get new clothes, get kind of just quickly replace he had a snowboard that was burnt up that was never replaced, but God knew he didn't need it. He was actually going off to Hawaii to join Youth with a Mission. So I don't know if I said that. So that's where he was going. So in the end, we were able to get on that airplane and fly to England. Friends met us at the London airport and drove us to the Stanton house where we would work for 1 year. And we met the staff. They were very kind. We were shown our rooms. We had a little 2 rooms within this mansion. That one room had like a microwave, a sink, and there was the living area, and another room had 2 beds and the bathroom, and there was a little hallway. But basically, what we did was we dropped off our luggage and left the very next day to do a 2-week whirlwind. We went to Italy, we went to Berlin, and we went to Hungary. The year before had been so crazy with selling the home and me working full time and just everything that was going on. We just kind of wanted a vacation before we started this journey with Jesus of bringing Jesus to Europe. So we got back from our vacation, started at the Stanton House. It's a retreat center, as I said, pastors, just regular people from all over England and sometimes from other parts. We had some African missionaries, met people from all over. They would come for a retreat, and we basically would clean the rooms, cook the meals, and give evening devotions and counsel and pray with people if they asked for it. And it was a beautiful, beautiful place. The grounds were beautiful. There was a flowing creek with ducks swimming. There was walking past. We were near Oxford. We were just outside of Oxford, England, in Stanton, St. John. And I just have to say this. I had visited my daughter in England when she was living those 3 years as a missionary in Berlin. We had gone to England just for a week. And my hero is C.S. Lewis. I love him. I've read all of his books. And so that was 4 years earlier, I think, maybe even 5 years earlier. I had visited my daughter and we had gone to England. And I wanted to see C.S. Lewis's place. I wanted to see his college. I wanted to see his pub on that trip. And we did go to the pub, but I didn't have that much money. And I remember it was only like £6 for each of us to get in to see. And we just didn't have 12 pounds, couldn't go in. And I remember that night in bed saying, I was here. I was so close, and I wanted to see Lewis's place and I didn't get to, and just kind of sad, very sad about that. Never dreaming that not 3-4 years later, I would be living in Oxford, England. And I remember that night when I was kind of crying in bed, and my daughter said to me, Mom, God is good. You don't know what the future holds. And she was right. I saw his place. I went to I got to see everything Lewis in the year that I lived there. That was such a big blessing. But anyway, we didn't know this. I see I'm kind of in the shade here. I loved England. I didn't know why God had called me there first, because I felt called to I thought were the harder places like Berlin. And I just couldn't, I just have always been in love with England and in love with the British accents. But something I didn't know is that British people, and please don't be offended if you're British, but I've had very many British, beautiful friends, beautiful people I know agree with me and say, yeah, it's true. They don't really like Americans, or they kind of look their nose down on Americans. I didn't know that. I don't know exactly why it is, but they even grow up telling jokes about Americans. And we are just like overgrown teenagers, or we're wasteful. We don't know how to conserve. We don't have any, what's it called? We don't have any, like, they have such order in England, and they do things like that are passed down, and they keep the ways, where we're like, hobos that just move with the wind and do different things. And anyway, that was the biggest shock. And also, you kind of think if you're coming into a Christian home and working with Christian staff that they're going to be loving. Well, they weren't. I don't think they really wanted Americans to come and work with them. They kind of knew we would be hard to train. Would we fit in? So at the beginning, it was the hardest trial, one of the hardest for both my daughter and I. After 6 months, she said, that's it. I'm going home. They were just nitpicky, mean to us, just not kind. We could never do it right, criticizing us. And it was hard. And I remember one day we just broke down. It was like we couldn't take it. We're not ones to speak our minds, to say, please quit picking up. We just kind of were grinning and bearing it, but becoming more maybe angry, more sad, but keeping all that in, till one day the dam just broke. And So then the trustees, there was a man and woman that were over the whole charity organization of the Stanton House. They met with us. We were able to pour our hearts out to them. They said they understood that past staff had had similar problems, but this woman, she said, I know it's hard, but you're going to have to just forgive. You're going to have to praise him anyway. Just put your hands on the back of a chair, speak in tongues, pray in tongues all the time, forgive all the time, and praise him. And those weren't principles that were new to me, but because the situation was so overwhelming, it was like we didn't even know how to live anymore. And I needed to hear those things. And it just changed everything. And so I just began constantly to forgive, to forgive, to forgive. Sometimes in a day, I might have to forgive like every 10 minutes, but along with praising him, along with speaking in tongues. And slowly, 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 that situation just changed. It just changed. In my mind, it was miraculous because it seemed impossible, but God changed it. And by the end of our year there, we were all best friends. And I'll never forget when my daughter and I, the day we were to leave, we drove from England to Berlin, Germany, after being there a year, and the staff that was there and my daughter and I, we all held hands and they prayed over us. They were praying blessings over us, and I'm listening to them pray over us, and all of a sudden I heard somebody, their voice cracked, and I looked, and those staff members were crying, and they were saying, we're going to miss Kim and Bree so much. And I thought, this is miraculous. And we maintained our friendships long after, even to today. We are still friends. So, as well, then I just kept questioning the whole time we were there. Why am I here, God? Oh, I know. You want me to bring change in the Stanton house. You want me to bring more of your spirit, bring more of your freedom. And I would do that all the time, think like, why am I here? Oh, I'm going to do something to change. And it wasn't until the end or somewhere in the middle that I realized I wasn't there to change anything. I was there so that God could change me and God could prepare me for the hard ground that was ahead, prepare me for the darkness that was Berlin, that was ahead, which I didn't know at that time, but that's what our year was about. And he did. He changed us. He taught us those principles of forgiveness, of praising, of looking to him, even if you don't understand the situation. So at the beginning of our time at the Stanton House, we decided to go to make our church a church in Oxford that was called St. Aldate's, that had been recommended to us. And our first Sunday there, my daughter was looking at the church bulletin and it said weekly prayer time for Germany. And Brianna said, look it, there's a prayer group for Germany. And so we contacted the leader. Her name was Frauke. Met her. She turned out to be a German, and somebody that met with her was named Kaya, also from Germany, and they were living in Oxford, England. But their hearts knew that their country was dark. They knew Germany was just far gone and needed Jesus. So they were praying weekly. We met with them. We just bonded with them almost instantly. And we found out that they were planning a prayer weekend to Berlin. And they just wanted to go and spend a whole weekend just going to different parts of Berlin, praying, worshiping. And we said, we're in. And Brianna, of course, told her story of being there for 3 years, ministering for 3 years, being burnt out. So halfway into our stay and also I just have to say, the whole year I didn't really know. God had just said, the first place I'm going to send you is to Oxford, England, and then I'll tell you what to do. I didn't know what the next move was at that point. And I did know he was whispering, "You're going to pioneer a work. You're going to pioneer a work." And I would tell people that. They would pray, and without 100% of the people would confirm, "Yes, I see you guys pioneering a work in Berlin." But anyway, we went on this. It turned out to be just a monumentful trip to Berlin with Frauke and Kaya, and there was another gal. I can't think of her name right now. Anyway, they had kind of tried to connect with different people, and one of the people they connected with while we were there was a pastor named Paul, and Brianna actually knew him as well from her time being there. And he had a church in the back of a cafe that was at the bottom of a building that was owned by a Christian in Berlin, and mostly Christians lived in that building. But the cafe was kind of to be an outreach, and then the church. Anyway, we met with him. He was also British from England, had been in Berlin about 15 years, and he and his wife was depressed. He had nothing positive to say about being a missionary in Berlin. We told him we were thinking maybe this was where God wanted us. He said, "It's a hard, hard road." He said, "I've been here 15 years, maybe a few converts. Nothing seems to work. It's a very hard place." And Brianna knew that from her 3 years. She left burnt out. So, and I just want to put in here, because people don't understand this. They look at Europe, and nobody seems to know Europe is such a needy place for God. Hopefully, people are knowing it now. But that was in 2007. And what the average American would say, "Oh, there's churches all over England. I saw the cathedrals and I saw the churches. And, Martin Luther, is from there. And there's Lutherans and there's Catholics." And well, the truth is, all of Europe has not gone with God. There are a lot of churches, but I would say the bulk of them are apostate. Even like a Baptist type church in Berlin, the pastor there would say, "Oh, Jesus didn't rise from the dead." There would be pastors that are homosexual. That's okay. So, and also in Germany, if you belong to one of those churches, those are called state churches, you had to pay taxes. And that just gave people an awful taste in their mouths. They felt like the church was just all about money. So the churches there are basically empty. And then in Berlin, which is kind of a different story, the Eastern blocks, Poland and the places where communism took over, the part of Berlin that was communist, even though communism had fallen, 1989 or whatever. Hope I'm right on that. The mindset was still there. They did such a good job brainwashing the average German that God is dead, that if you believe in God, you're stupid, you're not smart, that science, is the ultimate thing. And we just need to live life to better the earth. But when you die, that's it. There's no God, there's no heaven, there's no hell. And so in 2007, when I went to Berlin, parts of it were like, I'm sorry, in 2008, when I went to Berlin, it was as if you were back in the communist times. And I don't know if some of you might know, they had a thing called the Pioneer Girls, the Pioneer Boys. And I would meet adults that were a pioneer that was in the communist time. And yeah, it's really interesting how deep the seeds of communism went and are still in the soil of the former Eastern communistic places in Berlin. So anyway, we had a great weekend. We went all over Berlin. We were praying. We just felt like God wanted us to pray that joy would come to Berlin, that the sadness would be lifted, the warriors would be lifted. And so this was, I think it was probably our last night Brianna wanted to meet up with some of her former friends that she knew in Berlin. So we were on our way to a pub so she could meet them. But to get there, we had to go to a place called Potsdamer Platz, which has a square there and the train station. And we were kind of running through the square. And all of a sudden, I saw this young man. He was passing out what looked just like tracks. And he had a couple people with him. And I said, "Stop." I said, "I just have a feeling this guy's a Christian." Because that was part of why we went as well. We were hoping to connect with Christians and encourage them. So everybody stopped. And I went up to him and I said, "Are you a Christian?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Are you evangelizing out here?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "That's so awesome. We came to meet people like you and we want to encourage you." And he looked at me and he said, and he looked at the others with me and he said, "Do you know somebody named Jody in the United States?" And I said, "Well, yes, but you know, there's probably lots of Jodys in the United States." And then he looked at me and he said, "Do you know a Jody from Portland, Oregon?" And I said, "Yes, she's in my home church." And he said, "A Jody called my friend in Spain," because that's the only person she knew in Europe. "My friend in Spain called me and said, one, two, 5 women are coming to Berlin for a weekend to pray, and maybe I would meet you." And I said, "What? Are you kidding me?" And it turned out it was our Jody. She knew we were going to Berlin. She didn't tell us this, but she was getting on the phone trying to connect us with somebody in Berlin and knew the friend in Spain who knew. Now this young man's name is Arnold. He had called Arnold and said, "Look out for 5 women." Like I said, we did not know this. We just ran into him and there he was. We were just blown away. We were laughing. This is just amazing. What are the odds? And so, oh, I forgot this part. Earlier that day, like I said, I didn't know what the next step would be. I just knew God had called me to England. He would tell me what to do. And I can still remember this as if it was yesterday. We were in a part of Berlin on Friedrichstrasse. So we were walking down the street. And all of a sudden, almost audibly, I heard God say, "This is the next place I'm sending you. After the Stanton House, I'm sending you right here to Berlin." And so then that night we met Arnold and I told him, "We want to come here." He goes, "We need you. Please come. You can stay at my house with me and my parents. We need you. Please come." So we went back to Stanton House and talked a lot about when we should go, how we would get into Berlin. My daughter was really worried because she knew that to get an apartment in Berlin is super hard. They won't take you unless you have references, unless you can prove you paid rent, which they weren't going to take anything from America. So we were a little perplexed. How are we going to do this? When she had gone before, she went with an organization that, got her apartment and did everything for her. So on our own, we're not with an organization. How do we do this? And I think that's why Arnold told us we could stay with him. And he had to call us later and say, "I'm so sorry. My parents said that won't work out." But it was so kind of him to offer. But anyway, so we're trying to figure it out. And we also heard on that weekend trip that Youth with a Mission, YWAM, was starting up a base in Berlin. And I always wanted to be a YWAMer. And so I said to my daughter, "Why don't we try to join YWAM? Then we can be in Berlin. We can live there for a year, get training, and then after that." She didn't really want to, but it did kind of seem like that's the only way we knew how to get into Berlin without a big organization and money behind us. We were able to meet the YWAM team that weekend in Berlin, and we loved them. They said, "Great, mother-daughter, no problem. Here's the application, fill it out." So we went back to the Stanton House, filled out the application. they accepted us. And so we finished out our time in Stanton House, and it was from April to April. I don't know how God put April on our hearts, but we knew it was to be a year we would go to Berlin in April. And everybody knew we were leaving. And anyway, I think it was just a week before we were to leave the Stanton House. There was a phone call, and Bree took it, and they said, "We're so sorry to tell you, the school, the YWAM school you were to be part of, we've had to cancel it. We didn't have enough people. We're just not ready to have a school. Goodbye." And I'll never forget, I was sitting in the office at the Stanton House when my daughter came in tears. Said, "Mom, what are we going to do? We're leaving in a week. That school was canceled." And I looked at her, and in that moment, I felt like the Holy Spirit kind of gave me a gentle slap on the face and said, "I've been telling you, you're going to pioneer something. You aren't to join anything. You're to start your own ministry." And I said, "Oh God, you knew I would not have had enough faith to go without knowing what's ahead. But I have to go now. We quit our jobs. We have the ferry tickets to cross the channel into France. You know, we don't have anything left in England. It was as if God took me a week before we were to go, so I'd go, but wanted me to go on faith, trust him, believe what he said. And not that it wasn't scary, it was very scary. And just as we had roadblocks when we left the United States, such as my daughter's car burning, and I remember somebody almost ran head on into us. We almost got killed as well. And the same thing kind of happened. So we had that wonderful goodbye with everybody in Stanton House. We got into our car. Oh, we had bought a car in England for something like 200 pounds, and which was such a blessing. We were able to use that little car to see a lot of England in that year. But we had that thing stuffed uh, with our duvets, with our towels, with our clothes, with our books, with the things we had brought from the United States. It was literally, we even had things in the front, like on our laps. It was stuffed to the ceiling. This little car. Plus, it wasn't running that great. We had, people were laying hands on it for us to get from Berlin to get from England to Berlin. But anyway, we started out to the ferry. There was a time, we have to get there at this time to get on that ferry. And halfway there, going down the motorway, we got a flat tire. Oh, we didn't know how to change that flat tire. We stopped. Of course, we had to pull over to find the spare. We had to take that stuff out of our car, and then it started raining. It was pouring rain. And because there's those cameras all over England, they have, I think, the most, what are they called? CTV cameras. They're everywhere. So there was somebody picked us up on a camera, and right away a truck came. Not long, but long enough that we were soaked. Our belongings were soaked. But he was able to help us get that tire on. I think the whole thing set us back about 45 minutes to an hour. We were panicked. We were going to miss that ferry, and it's pretty expensive to book the ferry across. And I don't even know if we would have had the money. But anyway, we finally got going back on the road. We are kind of crying, kind of panicking, praying, "God, please do a miracle. Please save the ferry for us. Please." We got there, and you could see that, they have parking before it, and all the cars were on the ferry. You could see that there was no cars, and you have to check in. And the man said, "This is a miracle. For whatever reason, the ferry's been delayed 10 minutes or something. I will call and tell them you're coming." We made it on the ferry. We, praise God, got across. And back then as well, in 2007, there wasn't, the phones with the internet access like we have now. We didn't have, maps. So we had paper maps. And how my daughter did it, I don't know, but she navigated us from England to Berlin amazingly with maps. But while we're driving over, we stopped, of course. We had to stay 2 nights, I think, in 2 different places, wondering, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And just before we had left the Stanton house, we remembered we had stayed with a girl named Anna. And that was when we had gone on the prayer weekend with the German girls. And we had stayed with this girl named Anna. And Brianna said, that's the only thing I can think. Let's call her. Can we stay with her? Can we sleep on her couch? So we had called her and said, hey, explained why WHAM was canceled. And she said, you are welcome. Yes, come. You can sleep in my living room. We've got 2 couches in there. So that's where we were heading. And a day before we arrived, she called and she said, hey, an apartment just opened up here in the building. Maybe it's for you. So we arrived. She was kind and warm and let us just put all of our junk in there. And she called the owner of that building and said, this Kim and Bree are here. They need a flat. And she found out that it was already promised to somebody else. And unbeknownst to us, our good friend Arnold that we met evangelizing on the street had also knew about this apartment and called the man, told him about us. But a hang up for me, it was a nice apartment and it seemed too nice. I knew when Brianna had lived there before, she was able to get a flat for 350 euros, and that would be with coal heating. But I thought, we don't have, we have to really watch the money. I'm sorry. I've been saying we didn't have money. I did sell my home. And basically that was our money. But I didn't really have it invested. I knew it had to go as far as possible. So I was being very, very frugal. We didn't have supporters. We didn't have an organization behind us. So I did have money. I just wanted to be very cautious and careful. So we found out this flat being offered was 600 euros, where I was hoping for a 350. And we prayed and we prayed and we prayed. And I remember God said to me, Kim, why do you think I can't give you something nice like this? Why do you think I can't provide the money for something nice like this? So I said, okay, Lord. So the owner of the building, he was told we would love to have the flat. He decided to let us have it and not the other people. And even bigger, he did not ask for any papers. We did not have to prove anything. We moved in without even signing a contract. It took him a month to give us the contract. We didn't have to do a down payment. Usually you have to pay last month's rent at least. We didn't have to do that. And so God brought us in to Berlin, provided this beautiful apartment. It had an upstairs, like a big living room upstairs, and one huge bedroom and a small bedroom and a separate kitchen downstairs. And it was in a building like where a church was and a cafe below where the pastor Paul was, who was so discouraging. So it kind of had a comfortable feeling knowing that there was other Christians around. So that's our story of getting into Berlin. We don't yet know what we're going to do other than maybe start evangelizing with Arnold, this young man we met on the street. But I will continue this story in episode 3. And I thank you so much for listening. God bless you.